of your bowel wall, if you're allergic to pork, or if you have gout, kidney problems, or worsening of painful swollen joints. Call your doctor if you have any unusual or severe gastrointestinal symptoms or allergic reactions. Take Creon as directed by your doctor and always with food. Do not chew capsules as this may cause mouth irritation. Other side effects may include blood sugar changes, gas, dizziness, sore throat, and cough. These are not all the side effects of Creon.
Creon is the #1 prescribed EPI treatment. Ask your doctor about Creon for EPI and visit creoninfo.com or call 800-633-9110 to learn more. That's CREONinfo.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show on KCAA. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor, Teamsters 1932, a strong union with 14,000 members in the IE. Go to Teamsters1932.org for more information. I'm Rick Smith, host of The Rick Smith Show, inviting you to listen to my show during the noon hour every weekday right here on KCAA. My show is sponsored locally by Teamsters 1932. A strong union with 14,000 members in the IE. Our message is clear. Unions improve the lives of working people. You have a right to form and join a union, so go to Teamsters1932.org and get started now.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It's an important day today. Today is National Voter Registration Day. Hope you checked your voter registration. Hope you registered yourself. Hope you registered someone. Make sure you registered to vote. Kind of an important period we're in. Make sure friends, make sure family, make sure strangers are registered to vote. Make sure that if you got married, you changed your name, you changed your registration, especially in states that do that whole, you got to have everything on your license matching exactly everything on your registration, because there will be people scrutinizing. If you turned 18, by all means, all that stuff. Make sure your registration's up to date, because the anti-voting people, the ones who whined and complained that they lost, they will be checking. And look, this is an important election, and I've been saying this for a while, and I say this every election cycle. Every election is important. We go through this song and dance. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Oh my goodness, this is it. I think these next two really are. I think this one and the 2024 presidential election, I think these are probably going to be the most important elections of our lifetimes. Because it's no longer about just simply the red pill or the blue pill. It's no longer about this policy or that policy. It's about, will we have a democracy? Will we have people in elected office who really truly honor the sanctity of the ballot box, do have some idea of what the principles of this country were until they ripped it down. And as I've been saying, we're at a crossroads moment, and I've made this argument for a while that I feel we're at this kind of really an ideological moment. Much like when I was a kid back, I think about 1980 a lot. Because, I was a young kid, I'm looking at the future, the possibilities of what could be. You had Jimmy Carter, who was talking about, people being responsible and people conserving energy and moving us in a technological direction, putting solar panels on the White House and, a different direction. And then you had Reagan, who said, no, we don't need that. We're just going to basically the 1980 version of drill, baby, drill, which here we are all these years later, having basically invented the technology that the rest of the world has moved so far ahead of us on, that I think we're in a moment. We're in a moment where if we make the wrong choice, as we did, I believe, back in 1980, the country will continue down this path of division, of Hunger Games kind of winners and losers, and it's not the kind of legacy I want to leave for future generations. Now, the reason I say this is I think we're in this kind of moment, and the reason that we're doing this working class heroes tour coming up at the end of the month and into October is because I believe that you think about when the MAGA folks, when Trump was talking about making America great, you ask any of those people, when do you think we were great as a country? What was that moment where you go, hey, yeah, that's what we aspire to be. We want to return to that moment. Most every one of the red hat folks will say, the 50s and 60s. Now, some of them will say, because, those people knew their place. We had good traditional value. You're going to have that. But the mass of people you talk to, they talk about working class prosperity. They talk about, the kind of Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry kind of towns that we had. And, the good union jobs that could support a family on one wage. Then you could take vacations, and you had a car in the driveway and a chicken in every pot. And, you know the lore. You've seen the mental image of the Norman Rockwell era that was the 1950s and 60s. Now, was it that way for everybody? No, it was not. There were people who were definitely left out of this, and you have to fully understand that was the reality of the time. But there are people who pine for that era, and there are communities that cling to that past pride. That they used to be the people who built this, or were known for this. I always point to that bridge in Trenton. Trenton makes, the world takes. This idea that was their history, that was their heritage. You go to communities throughout this country. Akron, Ohio was the rubber capital of the world. Toledo, the glass capital. Flint, automobiles. La Crosse, Wisconsin, cookware. I mean, you name it. There were There were places that this was their identity, and it was all stripped away. We went through the 1980s and into the 90s of deindustrialization and horrible trade policy and neoliberalism that brought us this idea that we can have trickle down. We give the rich people all the money, and they'll take care of us. They'll make sure that there are jobs, and their pockets will fill, and then there will be things that spill over. I think we're in this moment right now where this administration, the Biden administration, is looking to the past and going, what created that prosperous working class? What did the greatest generation build? Not just for themselves, but for their children, that created broad prosperity for working people and the owners and the wealth class, because we had them too. What did we have? Well, we had really super high tax rates. And when you start talking to people about what the tax rates of the 1950s and 60s were, oh my goodness, nobody actually believes me, is what the interesting part is. Nobody believes that, in 1953, the top marginal tax rate in the country was 92%. Nobody believes that. Oh, that's not possible. And you go, yeah, in today's dollars, anyone who made more than $1.6 million back then in today's dollars, that dollar over 1.6 million was taxed at 92%. And all down the scale. Now, they didn't pay 92% on all of their money. It was the first 2,000 was taxed at a small amount, the next 2,000 another small amount, until you built up to 1.6 million. So you had a tax bracket every $2,000, and incrementally it went up. So the bigger your shoulders, this is where this analogy comes from. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you can carry back to the cave. The better off you're doing, the more you can help society invest in infrastructure and military and education and healthcare and all the things that societally we think back to that era and go, that was the great time. Now, understand, nobody paid 92%. The effective rate was somewhere in the high 60s, low 70s, as I remember. But it's still a damn sight bigger than the zero that Jeff Bezos paid in a number of years. The corporate tax rates back then were in the 50% range, not 15. And you wonder why we have these massive deficits and this debt. we've given the wealth class everything they could want in the hopes that eventually they would share. And we know that they never do. So it's my view that, along with the high tax rates, and we did have high tax rates that built a giant infrastructure plan that put the highway system across this country that Eisenhower built. We paid for our wars, like I said, hospitals and schools and all of this. Higher education, we didn't saddle a generation of kids with massive debt like we're doing today, just so we could have more rich people. We didn't do that. We also had smart government policy, like building an infrastructure, a highway system to move product and to move people and to move us into the 20th century back then. And we also had strong labor unions where people shared in the prosperity of the wealth that they created. That recipe is, for me, the path forward, and it's what the Biden administration has been moving us towards. You look at the infrastructure bill that they pushed through, has strong prevailing wage provisions in it. You look at the manufacturing that they're trying to bring back, talking about, hey, let's make sure that those are union jobs so that people can earn a living off it. The CHIPS bill, that's going to help create manufacturing. And again, this idea of pushing for stronger worker rights and representation so that the wealth is shared. We haven't had that in a while. And I think that's why we have such anger and such division, is because there's a hopelessness, a helplessness, if you will, of most people go, well, I can't deal with this. So these cultural, social, whatever issues that are thrown out to us as red meat, that's what they grasp onto. Personally, I believe the way forward, the way to unite us as a country, is to organize the workplaces. And we're seeing this all across the country as organizing is almost reaching pandemic levels for corporate America. It's contagious. There are people organizing all over the place. In fact, nearly, I think, 274 employees at Home Depot in Philadelphia just announced yesterday that they have filed a unionization effort in that Home Depot. The very first Home Depot in the country, by the way, which I hope this will catch like wildfire. We're seeing workers in fast food. We're seeing workers in coffee shops and in retail stores and, Home Depot. We're seeing workers organizing like that great generation did back so long ago. And for me, this is the exciting part of this. This is what I think can help us move in a much more unified, much more prosperous direction, which is why we're heading out on the tour on September 30th and going to spend the entire month going to communities across this country and investigating. Hey, what was great? What then happened? How did you lose this identity, this prosperity? And then, what are we doing to change this? And understand that we're at a crossroads. We could go backward and end up with, whoever in 2 years down the road ends up becoming the next president could take us on a completely different path. I think the Biden administration is moving us in the right direction, recreating manufacturing, investing in the country, making sure that workers have the right to collectively bargain. All stuff that I think will move us in a more prosperous direction. But I'm curious your thoughts. Love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Want to know what you think? Quick break. Back on the other side. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Remember, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find ours. Back after this.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs. in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, going along the lines of this manufacturing, you look at the fact that the White House put out the number that so far in 2022, there have been companies that have announced $13 billion in domestic electric vehicle manufacturing that's going to be happening in this country. That's more than triple the 2020 investment. That means we're moving in that direction, that we're going to make stuff again. That's exciting. And it's important because I think if we learned anything out of the pandemic, you got to make stuff. As I've always said, you need domestic production for domestic consumption, and we should be doing much more of it. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Kurt on line 1 from Tucson. Kurt, what's on your mind, brother?
Hey, Rick, how you doing, brother?
I am living the dream. What's going on?
Awesome. So I got some good news for you on National Registration Day.
Hit me.
So the youth from Starfish Environmental Group have been registering voters in Western Pennsylvania they started it about the beginning of June. And so today, from June till today, they have registered 738 new voters for the general election here in November.
No, it's fantastic. The more young voters that we get registered, the better. The hope is that come November 8th, they wander into the voting booth and they pull the lever.
Yeah, and I think the messaging that the youth had towards the new voters, they're really good at messaging, Rick, and I really think they're going to respond. I think the voters that they registered, and they kind of just the sad thing is like, I wish the DNC and the DCCC would spend more time on voting education, and because I think it's confusing for a lot of new people. Even when I look back at when I was 18 and I did it, I was kind of lost, and there was no one really to kind of guide you. I remember looking at the ballot and it's like, what do I do?
See, this is where, Kurt, where I encourage parents to teach their children. Our kids have gone with us every election cycle since they were born, except for during the COVID period where we did the mail-ins, and even then showed them the ballot. So for me, democracy is participatory. We need to pass it down generation to generation. I don't think it's something we're born with. I think it's something that we have to pass on. So, to your point, and this is where I'm hoping that there are parents listening, take your kids to the polls with you. We take ours first thing in the morning. They're a little late for school, but that's okay. They learn how to participate in their democracy, and I think that's what we need to be passing on as parents as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it's I don't think it's really taught how important it really is. And one of the good things that the whole group of Starfish has been doing throughout the primary is trying to convey, getting it across that the local and the state elections really matter. And because I think a lot of times we focus too much on the presidential. Matter of fact, they were just talking about on 60 Minutes Sunday, they were asking Biden if he's going to run for 2024. And I think there's so many things you could be questioning him with instead of that, because we're not even there yet.
No, you're so spot on, and I tell people all the time, it's those off year, not even your congressional elections, it's your local dog catcher, your local county commissioner, your local tax assessor. Those are the people that you should be voting for, in higher numbers, because those are the people who affect your daily life much more than president or senator does. This is why, again, democracy's participatory. You got to get in there, roll your sleeves up, and learn a little. And I know in our busy lifestyles and everybody's working, 2-3 jobs to make ends meet, it's hard to do, but it's part of what we have to do.
Right. Out of all the 45 states that we phone banked in to make calls for candidates across the country, the state of Florida was really kind of weird. We never really, until this election, we've never really phone banked much in Florida. And the biggest response we got, and this is from Democrats and Independents, it was overwhelming how many voters down there said, we don't vote in the primary election. And we were like, no, you guys, you really got to vote. A lot of people yell and scream about term limits. And the primary election, to me, is the best sort of system to term limits.
That is our term limit. Your right to vote. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of throwing the bums out, Kurt. Big fan.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that makes me happier than to go in and say, Scott Perry, pardon me, Scott Perry, my representative. There's nothing makes me happier than going to vote against him, and I wish more people in my district would, so we could throw the bum out. But that's just my thoughts.
Exactly.
But hey, good news, Kurt. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you're keeping up. Please keep us up to date on what's going on even down the road.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it. No, this is, again, back to this idea that voting matters. Every election. For me, it's that simple. Now, tomorrow, evidently, supposedly big breaking news coming out of New York, as the Attorney General there, Letitia James, is tweaking out major announcement in the morning. Got a lot of people speculating what that major announcement could be. Oh, I don't know. Maybe something about the Trump Organization. Maybe something about Trump and his business dealings. Maybe, I don't know. Going to be interesting to find out. Now, it's been a bad week so far for Trump because there's a big announcement coming. We also found out that that the sexual battery suit brought by Jean Carroll, that is going to move forward. She's planning to sue him for sexual battery under the state's new survivor's law. So things not going well. And if you look at the other news today in the Trumposphere, the special Grand Master, Grand Poobah that he asked for, not having what the defense is putting out. In fact, this special master, Raymond Dearie, Judge Raymond Dearie, said, my view is you can't have your cake and eat it too, meaning you can't claim that it belongs to you and classified stuff, and all of the if you remember the evolving story about what Trump actually had. They're basically saying, look, pick a story, stick with it. You don't get all this stuff back. Trump's insisting that he shouldn't have to state in any legal proceeding whatsoever that he declassified these documents. And you go, but wait a second, I thought he waved the hand. I thought the magic hand waving thing, I thought that happened. Well, evidently, this is where they're not putting up really any type of defense or any type of anything. There's nothing here. And that's the weird part about it. You go, why would you put yourself in the middle of this without any type of defense? So another bad day in the Trumposphere. And it kind of makes you go, good. Maybe somebody will finally hold Trump accountable. Maybe finally something will jump up and grab him. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What do you think? What will the special announcement be Are we expecting Trump himself? Is this someone with the Trump organization? Maybe one of the brain trust? I'm interested to find out. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with our good friend Will Bunch about his upcoming book. Also, I got a lot of email on the whole Nazi thing, on the whole hand raising, the whole the what looked like a Nazi salute. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day the Chicago Teachers Union walked off the job for the first time in 25 years. The historic week-long strike resonated nationwide among trade unionists and served to reinvigorate the labor movement. Certainly, higher wages and better benefits were among the teachers' demands. The city's mayor, Rahm Emanuel, had canceled the union's wage increase, laid off close to 1,000 teachers, and went on the attack against seniority rights and working conditions. The strike enjoyed wide public support among parents and the public. Teachers emphasized broader educational problems they faced, namely the attacks fueled by corporate privatization. They wanted a return to more traditional forms of education rather than simply preparing students for endless rounds of testing. They wanted more art, music, and gym classes. And they demanded stable funding for social support services for the most vulnerable at-risk students. Union teachers understood that the Board of Education was using standardized testing to get rid of teachers and schools in order to privatize education, all in the name of turning around failing schools and helping the kids. Though the contract was less than perfect, it showed the power working people have to hold the line against continued assaults on their standards of living, especially in the public sector. The CTU was able to beat back attempts at merit pay and increased use of student test scores in teacher evaluations. They won first-time recall rights, supply reimbursements, and liberal arts classes. There were concessions, however, made on seniority rights, pay for laid-off teachers, and longer workdays. But the CTU demonstrated that strikes can win in a period of extended anti-union onslaughts.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars, Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars, Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at natvup.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who...
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of email on yesterday's comments about the Mastriano rally here in Pennsylvania. Was it a Nazi salute, or was it just good God-fearing, God-American-loving Christians pointing to the heavens, seeking guidance from the good Lord above? Which? Look at the video. You decide for yourselves. A bunch of folks not happy with my comment about the Nazi fidget spinners. I'm waiting for it to come, man. I'm waiting for the Nazi windmills, little things. They're just windmills. They're not Nazi symbols. We seem to be making a lot of excuses for what is right in front of us. Scary times. Here to share some thoughts on, well, was it the Hitler thing, or was it just hey, we're just pointing up? What's wrong with a group of people all at the same time doing this kind of thing? That's why I've asked my good friend Will Bunch to come share some thoughts. He's a national columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Also got a new book out. I'm going to want to get to this. After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on. So I guess you did not see this coming, huh? Is that that's the obvious one. But
boom. So was it the dreaded the Sieg Heil salute, or was it just good God-fearing Christian folk all coming together for a revival to share their dream and point to the heavens and one marching together? What are we going with?
Look, I mean, they love to quibble about these things, and was it a Nazi thing? I guess not. It wasn't an official Nazi salute, but like the Stephen Colbert thing about truthiness. I mean, was it Hitler-ness? Absolutely, it was. It's look, it's the same. Whether it's what the Nazi Party members were doing in Nuremberg in 1934, or not. The principles are basically the same. You've got a cult of personalities, people willing to surrender their identities for this group identity and to symbolize it with this raised fist and this kind of loyalty pledge. It's the principles of fascism. We're seeing all of these principles of fascism play out. Whether it's these diatribes against their enemies, the demonizing of the other. Ron DeSantis, who's another one I would put in the pool. Shipping these migrants to Martha's Vineyard and dehumanizing people trying to seek asylum in the United States. Here in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz is really demonizing anybody who's ever committed a crime, basically, or been accused of committing a crime. Some of them didn't even do it, but he's running against criminals. So I mean, these are fascist tendencies, and now, Christian nationalism, which is the employment of the idea that Christian law should trump democracy, basically. All of these things are tenets of fascist political movements. So when you see people raising their right arm, and if you just look at the videos, look at the pictures, it just looks pretty much the same. I guess they added a wrinkle at the Trump rally in Youngstown of raising their one finger because they're also into QAnon, that's not really better. That's kind of worse, right? Yeah. That they are fascist and supporting QAnon. I know, Rick, you've probably seen the movie Dr. Strangelove, right? And
yeah.
Remember how Peter Sellers' character, one of his characters, who's the ex-Nazi, Dr. Strangelove, the ex-Nazi brilliant rocket scientist, can't restrain himself from raising his right arm in that fashion. And I thought of that scene watching the pictures of the Mastriano rally, because when this preacher, or alleged preacher, this Lance Wallnau character, asked the people at the Mastriano rally to raise their arms like that, it's funny how many of them did it exactly like the Hitler salute. Like they were primed for that.
It's like it was like visceral. They already had it in them to do, and it's kind of frightening. But I look at a lot of the people who are trying to be Trump and trying to pick up on the Trump because. That seems to be the Republican Party in this moment, but nobody, I think, moves further in the fascist direction, in my view, than Mastriano does. I mean, this guy is, he's a true believer. I think Oz is trying to do whatever he can do, to get ahead, to use this moment politically to try and to score points, to score votes. But I believe to his core, Mastriano is. The reincarnation of that carbon cutout, which is that much more frightening to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you go back and look at his life story, I mean, he's animated by certain values that go way back. He wrote this creepy master's thesis back in 2001, about a leftist, gay-inspired takeover of the United States, and this heroic colonel who hides in the woods to fight them off. I mean, he's got a martyr complex. He's obsessed, with lost causes and martyrs and Flight 93 and the Confederacy and I mean, you don't want somebody with a martyr complex as governor of your state.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring that up because I was watching a couple of clips of General Michael Flynn. And we're going to attack the machine gun nests. I'm not getting on the Nazi train, and this idea, the hero complex comes into this as well. That that they alone were going to stop this entire machine. That
I alone can fix it, like Trump famously said. And I mean, it's just a classic tenet of call it whatever, authoritarianism or strongmen or fascism or But I mean, that's the general direction. I mean, Mastriano seems to suffer from extreme homophobia. He's constantly talking about. I mean, his number one issue seems to be taking away transgender rights if he gets elected governor. He's got an obsession with Dr. Rachel Levine. He talks about her all the time at events in a mocking fashion. Apparently his mother was lost her seat in their New Jersey Township School Board back in 2000 because she wrote something that was a diatribe against quote homosexuals unquote. So it runs in the family, and so
sounds like a childhood thing.
Yeah, he's a true believer with a homophobe with a martyr complex who's gotten in deep with this Christian nationalist movement, and I mean the judgment to think that he wants to make a person like this pastor, this Lance Wallnau, who led the Nazi-style pledge, that he wants to make this guy the face of his campaign. I would urge people to go to Inquirer.com and check out a story, not by me, but by one of my great colleagues, William Bender, same initials, investigative reporter who did a deep dive into this Lance Wallnau character that was published today. And the guy's a con man, selling the gold coins of, Donald Trump and religious figures and really doesn't have much of a theological background. He just is kind of a con man and a huckster who kind of saw the ultimate con and he's wormed his way into Doug Mastriano's inner circle as so many of these people have, Julie Green, the self-styled prophet who, is convinced that Nancy Pelosi is drinking baby's blood and has said all kinds of other insane things. I think she said something about, King Charles having murdered Queen Elizabeth.
There's a ton of insanity. And you got to ask yourself, and because I have this conversation with people who I used to have some respect for, who vote for Republicans, and you go, this is the Republican Party today. This isn't the party of Reagan. This isn't the party of Eisenhower. It's not the party of Lincoln. This isn't your parents' or grandparents' Republican Party. These people are off the beaten path, and I don't know how they got so far off the sane path, but they're not on it.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, the fact that they can make people like us nostalgic for Ronald Reagan. I mean, what does that tell you?
No, look, Reagan, Nixon.
If I was, if if Doug Mastriano was going to become my governor, I would trade him for Ronald Reagan in a New York minute. But and I'm somebody who wrote a book critical of Reagan. But yeah, so.
No, and the thing is people were going, Trump is, Trump's the worst thing ever. I go, no. I was saying this during Trump's 4 years. I go, what scares me is what's after Trump. Trump isn't very bright. It's all about him. He's a hyper narcissist, and he can be played, which we've seen, on the international scale. These folks, these ideologues, these extremists, these religious nutcases, they can't be swayed by anything other than pure ideology, and that's the frightening part.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you're seeing these kind of mutations, right? Because it's like Mastriano is like the religious Trump, right? The authoritarian, but really plugged into this religious movement. And I think the guy, and I think you'd probably agree with me. I think the guy because I felt the same way during Trump, that like the next guy could be worse for those same reasons, that you saw Trump's narcissism and occasional buffoonery just drag him down into the muck.
Yep.
And what if there was a guy who really knew how to use the tools of authoritarianism?
Yeah, and this is what I was saying during the Trump years, that DeSantis worried me because he has all those tendencies and is a smart guy. He's somebody who knows how to use.
DeSantis is the guy. Although you have to wonder, like if he just got so full of himself. I mean, it seems like everything he's done recently has been to outdo the thing before, and he's it's kind of an Icarus flying too close to the sun type situation, maybe. But I mean, I think I have to think this Martha's Vineyard thing on some levels is going to backfire. Not that any true believer Republicans are going to defect. They're going to love it. They're going to buy into the Fox Kool-Aid. But I thought it was really dumb to go after Venezuelans. I mean, in a state like Florida, where what did he win last time around, by like 40 or 50,000 votes? Or he won by a very small margin in 2018. He was probably on track to do better this time. But what if all those Latino voters in Florida who fled communism, whether it was Venezuela or Cuba or or socialism or communism, or some of the other leftist countries who've been voting Republican for that reason, how is deporting Venezuelan asylum seekers people fleeing the Maduro regime, how is that going to look to them? And he's going to lose some votes over this, and I don't know if he's going to lose enough to lose the election. Probably not. But,
yeah, I think the calculus is that.
But it does question his broader judgment if he's going to run for president.
Yeah, but no, I think this was calculated, and I know it upset Donald Trump, because that was his stunt. He wanted to do that, and was very angry about it. But I don't think it's going to hurt DeSantis. I know my lefty friends are like, "Oh, this is horrible. It's we're gonna." No, the cruelty is the point. It's who these people are. Sure. So the more cruel, the better, and the more you're going to rile up the base and get them fired up to get out and vote. I don't see this as going to hurt him. I think this is going to really, inflame the base and get them out to support him. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, right. And his short-term goal has got to be peeling would-be primary voters away from Trump. So if that's his goal, it's a pretty good stunt for him politically, right? Yeah. So, but he does have to get through a gubernatorial election. But
he does.
He will probably.
Oh, absolutely. I don't see Charlie Crist beating him. I hope so. I would love to see him gone, but. Even if he was, that means he's got all of his time to run for president. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Bunch. Will's a national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Got a new book out, and I got to talk a little bit about this. After the Ivory Tower Falls, how college broke the American dream and blew up our politics, and how to fix it. Will, I understand you're going to be in Chicago on Saturday, October 22nd. For our listeners in Chicago on AM 820 WCPT, you're going to be at the Northwestern University campus of Evanston. At the Norris University Campus Center. Talk about the book. This is a big deal for you, right?
It is a big deal. I've been working on been working on writing the book for a couple of years. It's an idea I probably had for more than a decade. Just trying to figure out, your colleagues, as it were, who do right wing radio. I listen to their shtick sometimes because I want to know what the other side was saying, especially when Rush Limbaugh was still alive. I spent a lot of, when I was a more active dad, I spent a lot of time, too much time in the car, and so I would tune into Rush Limbaugh to see what they were saying, and it's going back to like the 2000s, and I was just kind of fascinated by the whole topic of resentment against elite, educated, the professional class, journalists like myself, but college professors, Hollywood movie stars, people like that, and it seemed to me that we were starting to really, split up, cleave along this line of whether or not you went to college, and lo and behold, we started to see that in the election results, right? More and more than any time before, the Democratic Party is now heavily the choice of people with college degrees, and more the Republicans have tailored their pitch, to working class voters, and trying to play on grievance and resentment against the professional classes or the elites, as they call it. I personally don't feel particularly elite, but
No,
that's
I agree with you, but
that's how we're characterized on the left. Yeah.
Here's my problem, though,
right.
and it would fit neatly like this. And I know a lot of my my white working class friends do vote for Republicans and have bought the anger and the jealousy and the division.
Yeah.
They've bought into it. But my problem, Will, is that the Republicans haven't brought any policy that would help them. In fact, the policies that Republicans continue to push out actually hurts them, which is kind of that useful idiot moment.
Of course, and I see that specifically in the subject of my book, which is, so what has happened. In the book, I try to look at the history and the current situation of what's happened to college and expensive. Why, what's happened to college in America? Why did it become so expensive, and why did it become harder to get into, less accessible, and particularly, why do so many middle class people feel that college is out of reach for them? So these are, these are some of the topics, that I explore in the book. And could you rephrase your question a little bit, because I kind of, in saying that, I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, I mean, the reality is, and the point was that I'm making is, I get the idea that Republicans are going after working class voters.
Right. So what I was going to say is, it's funny because when it comes to college itself, I mean, if I were a Republican, if I were representing a Rust Belt community, and people in my district were getting shut out of the labor market because they weren't educated enough for employers, or they didn't have the right skills that employers were looking for, I'd be working on that issue, right? I'd be saying, all right, well, maybe, first of all, I'd like to see more of my constituents go to college, but the ones who don't want to college, how can the government do more with trade schools, vocational training, internships, apprenticeships? How can the government work on the fact that 18-year-olds are falling off the grid because, we're saying that you're on your own at age 18 and not helping them? And that's not what Republicans do. Instead they start culture wars. They're telling kids, just don't go to college because leftist professors are going to indoctrinate you. And how is that helping these kids? So what are they, all right, so you don't go to college because you're not going to be indoctrinated. Why aren't they pushing for the things that people who don't go to a 4-year school need, like free trade school? In the book I profile, it's kind of a fluke, but in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which is where I live, there is a free trade school. It's called the Williamson School of Trades. It was an eccentric millionaire back in the 19th century, when millionaires were like billionaires, basically. Didn't have any heirs and left all his money to found this school that was originally for orphans. Now it's for men, but it's a 3-year trade school, and if you get in, it's free, and you learn carpentry or masonry or landscaping, and employers are tripping over themselves to hire these kids once they come out. And there's no reason we can't do more of that and try and match people with skills. But
yeah, and there's no reason we can't go back to.
When's the last time a Republican proposed that?
Yeah, and also we could go back to the time when employers used to bring people on and entry-level jobs and give them the skills they need to help them in their business, not putting it on the back of the taxpayers or on the back of the individual. There's a lot to go around here, but I hope the folks will come out and take a look at your spiel, grab the book, which is After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It, written by Will Bunch. Will, as always, incredible talking with you. I appreciate the time. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Hey, Rick, it was great to be on. Thanks for having me. Have me on anytime. I love it.
Good stuff. Again, make sure you check out the book. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Gonna take a quick break right here. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1830. That was the day that the Reverend Richard Allen brought black leaders together at his Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met to discuss the rising white violence and discrimination toward black free residents in northern cities. 40 people answered Allen's call, representing 7 states. The delegates included many of the leading black ministers and abolitionists of the day. Those who attended risked personal harm as white mobs threatened the delegates. Due to the danger, the group met in secret starting on September 15th. Then, on this day, they began open sessions. For 5 days, the delegates considered multiple responses to the conditions black Northerners faced. They founded the American Society for Free Persons of Color for improving their conditions in the United States, for purchasing lands, and for establishment of a settlement in the province of Canada. The organization emphasized pushing for legal protections for black residents in the United States. They focused on education as a means of uplifting and improving the lives of black citizens. But delegates also supported the idea of an outlet to Canada for those black families who wanted to leave for their safety. The National Convention reconvened several times over the next 3 decades. Multiple meetings were held at the state and local levels. These meetings gave black leaders a chance to devise coordinated strategies to stand up against the increasing violence and restrictive laws of the North, and to call for an end of slavery in the South. One outcome of these meetings was the founding of labor schools to train black students in the skilled trades as a means to gain economic independence. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So again, if you want to see Will, we'll be at the Chicago Humanities Festival on Saturday, October 22nd, talking about the book After the Ivory Tower Falls at the Norris University Center on the campus of Northwestern University in Evanston. We will be in Chicago for our Chicago audience on October the 11th for the Greg Palast movie. We're finalizing date. It looks like we're going to be teaming up with the Rainbow Push folks and Jesse Jackson to show that in conjunction with WCPT AM 820. Also, for our listeners in Minneapolis, listening on KTNF, we will be in Minneapolis on the 12th of October for an event there at the Crooners Lounge. I hear it's a fabulous place. A couple hundred people can come see the flick, and Greg will be there as well, I believe. I get a chance to meet Greg Palast and take a look at the film, which really, the previews that I've seen, one of those things that just makes you shake your head and go, on National Voter Registration Day, we should be seeing that movie today to make sure that we all get out and register to vote, because the things that the right will go to, the lengths that they will go to make sure that people don't have access to the ballot box, pretty remarkable. And in fact, in one of the scenes, Greg goes to this woman's house who is big Republican poobah there in Georgia. And the Georgia law gives individuals the right to challenge other people's votes. Well, she challenged something like 30,000 people's votes. Interestingly enough, they seem to be a particular type race of people, not Lily White like her. But Greg goes through the list. Do you know this person? No. Then why'd you block their vote? Good question. Maybe something that could be addressed. This is why, again, on National Voter Registration Day, you got to make sure you're registered. You got to make sure you are registered. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast.
We're reaping what we've sown. We're now experiencing devastating climate impacts.
3 simultaneous major storms underscore climate crisis impacts. Climate change juiced Pakistan's catastrophic flooding, study finds. Plus,
this is my ancestors' land, and I feel like I shouldn't have to leave.
Court blocks massive proposed plastics plant in Louisiana.
All those blockages and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen to you as a climate scientist is that your predictions come true.
Yeah, that's also the worst thing that can happen to you as a political news person on the radio. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know the Queen of England died a couple of weeks ago, so that's kept the news media busy. But as it turns out, there were 3 huge storms over one single weekend.
And a lot more than that over this past summer. As we go to air, it's Climate Week in New York City, the annual Climate Solutions Conference coinciding with the United Nations General Assembly. Both events arrive after a summer of extreme weather disasters around the world. Pakistan is still reeling from one of the worst climate disasters in history. The World Health Organization warns of a second disaster. Waterborne and mosquito-borne diseases are surging after unprecedented rains inundated a third of the nation, killing more than 1,500 people, and there is not enough medicine to treat millions of displaced people living in crowded camps. This week, climate experts at the World Weather Attribution Initiative reported that climate change supercharged the intensity of Pakistan's record rainfall by as much as 50%. And the month-long extreme heat wave that preceded the rain was made 30 times more likely. This past weekend, 3 powerful storms hit simultaneously around the world, underscoring the rising costs of inaction on climate change. Hurricane Fiona ripped across Puerto Rico as a Category 1 storm, causing a territory-wide blackout on its fragile electric grid. Some areas received as much as 30 inches of rain, triggering astonishing flooding. As we go to air, 1 death has been confirmed, thousands rescued from the floods. President Biden has issued a state of emergency to free up federal disaster funds.
I hope he's ready to throw them some paper towels.
And FEMA says it learned from monster Hurricane Maria, which devastated the island 5 years ago this week. This time, FEMA pre-staged emergency.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Hey, what's up? AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. The Federal Reserve announced another interest rate hike. The AP Sagar Magani reports they expect to make more in the fight against stubbornly high inflation.
For a third straight meeting, the Fed boosted its key rate by 0.75 of a point to the highest level in 14 years.
We are taking forceful and rapid steps.
And Chairman Jerome Powell says the Fed would want to be very confident inflation is moving down to its 2% target before considering halting the hikes.
We're not at that level.
In making borrowing more expensive, the goal is to slow economic growth enough to tame inflation without triggering a recession, a so-called soft landing.
No one knows whether this process will lead to a recession, or if so, how significant that recession would be.
But most economists say they think the steep hikes will lead to a full-blown recession late this year or early next. Sagar Magani, Washington.
New York Attorney General Letitia James is suing former President Donald Trump.
This investigation revealed that Donald Trump engaged in years of illegal conduct to inflate his net worth, to deceive banks, and the people of the great state of New York.
James says Trump padded his net worth by billions of dollars by lying about the value of prized assets. Donald Trump called the lawsuit another witch hunt by a racist attorney general. James is black. At the United Nations General Assembly, President Biden talked about what Russia is doing to civilians in Ukraine.
That should make your blood run cold.
The president says Russia shamelessly violated the UN Charter in Ukraine. A human rights group says more than 800 Russians have been arrested in anti-war demonstrations in 37 cities after President Vladimir Putin ordered a partial mobilization